And we're live. We're gonna give it like a minute or something before we get started, but I see there's already a few of you joining us, so you just have to wait a little bit before we get started. John, how are you doing?
I'm fine. I've had a bit of a cold this week, but I'm feeling a little bit better, but my voice might be affected by it.
We are still happy that you're going to power through and take us with you on this learning journey, despite the cold and the cracking voice. Super great. Okay, so the obvious question need to be, will you watch the Swedish Melodifestivalen tomorrow? Because it is the final.
Well, I usually try to avoid it, but it's hard because the children, they like it. So, and also my neighbor is competing. So
really? Okay. Interesting. Maybe we need to do a separate podcast about that one. Great. It's 1 o'clock, so I suggest we get started. Welcome everyone to How We Hire. For those of you who are joining us live, extra welcome. There's a chat functionality. If you have questions for me or John, please put them in the chat and I'll try to incorporate them throughout the conversation. If you're listening into the recording, you're also very welcome, but you don't have the privilege to ask questions. My name is Linnea and I will be your host today. I am a licensed psychologist and the COO at Alva. And Alva is a candidate assessment platform working towards revolutionizing the world of hiring. And today I am so excited. I'd said that right before we went live that, John, I think you have the coolest job in Sweden. I'm a bit subjective maybe, but still. So excited to welcome you, John Hermiz, the Chief Psychologist at the Swedish Defense Conscription and Assessment Agency. Or to say in Swedish, Plikt, prövningsverket. It was a hard word, but I nailed it.
You did.
I'm a huge fan of mechanical assessments, but I think you, John, and your team are doing you're doing things that takes it to a completely different level. As an example, John's agency conducts more than 40,000 assessments every year. And we're talking about evaluations from everything from police recruits to military officers. So positions that are directly impacting Sweden's national security, very important jobs that you have. And you lead a team of over 100 psychologists and are the project leader for the selection methods, as well as the Swedish Enlistment Battery, in Sweden called I-testet.
Yes.
Beyond excited, a warm welcome to you, John. So happy that you're here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Super cool. So I gave a brief introduction, but still, what do you do and why do you do it?
As you said, I am the chief psychologist of the agency, and I've been so since 2018. And my key responsibilities include that I am responsible for the methods, the psychology methods, the selection methods to evaluation and development, and also training. I am also, in a broader sense, responsible for the learning and development for all of the psychologists. And one thing that you might not know is that our operations are classified as healthcare, which means that I'm also responsible for adherence to all the laws and regulations that we must follow as a healthcare provider.
That's really interesting. And we also said that before we got live. We're going to try to be as concrete as possible, but there's some things that are actually that you can't talk about because it's confidential. So we're going to try to balance that, giving as much detail without telling stuff that you cannot talk about, obviously.
Yes, that's important because almost all of our psychological methods are surrounded or protected by secrecy, by law. And that's because the purpose of the methods would be undermined if they came to the common knowledge.
Oh, that's a great point. So can you tell me a little bit about your role? What does day in your life, a day in your work day look like at the Swedish Defense Conscription Assessment Agency?
Well, it's mostly meetings nowadays. A lot of meetings. I'm part of the leadership group for the department that I work in, but I also have my own team. So it's mostly different types of meetings. As you said earlier, I have also been the project manager of the development of the new Swedish Enlistment Battery. So there again, there's meetings. But I do enjoy the occasions when I can sit down and either do some calculations or write some reports and stuff like that. Just some quiet time where I feel that I actually work by my own. But it's mostly meetings on a daily basis.
That I can recognize that.
Yeah.
How would you say that the organization that you work in today is different from other organizations?
Well, there are many differences, and the most obvious one is that we are a government agency. And I'm from a consulting background, so that's sort of a contrast. When you're in a private company, a consultant working within assessments, there's always, I mean, of course, you want to do a good job and you have focus on quality, but there's always some focus on sales, finding new customers, making revenue, bonuses and stuff like that. We don't have any financial incentives in that sense. Of course, we have like a monthly salary, but we are not driven by those kinds of things. We are driven by providing security and defense to Sweden, and by doing high quality selection processes. So that's a difference, I believe, and also another difference is that just the sheer scale of our operations. As you said, we're doing 40,000 assessments in 2025, and I'm not sure that there is any other organization in Sweden that does that type of volume.
No, exactly. And it feels like when it comes to like hiring and selection, obviously like quality is always the most important thing. But to where you started, that your whole assignment is to make like good predictions or good decisions.
Yes.
How do you see that like focus on quality in your everyday work?
Well, we're very thorough when we develop new methods. It's not a fast process. We always do it very methodically, and we always involve the client. And one thing that we do is that when we launch a new method, if there is an existing method, we don't just launch the new one. We almost always try it out. We do like double assessments, like 300, and then we do some calculations and look at the statistics, because we're not a fan of surprises, especially when you're making assessments for like these crucial parts of society, like the police force and the military defense. It's not like you want any surprises. So we try to be very methodical and put some extra time in. And we also we use a lot of reference groups, and as you said, there's approximately 100 psychologists within the agency. So we try to use that group because they are experts in what they do. So they can do a lot of contribution.
Yeah, because I think it is interesting. I've already gone off script here because I think it's so fascinating. But how? Because the obvious like profession for a psychologist might not be what you think a psychologist does. Like, why is your group of psychologists like so well suited for this task?
Well, as I mentioned earlier, our operations is classified as healthcare, and it's pretty natural because we also, aside from psychologists, we also have nurses and doctors working here, and the assessments we do for the basic military training with conscription. the one of the purpose is to prevent injury and illness. Because when you go into military training, it's totally different than your ordinary life. Of course, depending on what your ordinary life looks like, but for most people, it's different. It's a higher degree of stress and strain, and you're taking part in potentially a little bit dangerous activities. So we feel that we have a responsibility to prevent unnecessary injuries and illnesses. And also, we have to prevent, because you're getting training in like combat, and you're getting training in weapons and weapon systems. So you really want to avoid bringing in the wrong type of person. So, I mean, I lost my thread here, but we were speaking about the healthcare part of it. So that's why we do the assessments in a healthcare setting. And as you said, why is it important to be a psychologist? Because if you're going to speak about mental health, there's really no better role than a psychologist to do that, because they are trained in mental health and they understand the nuances of mental health.
Great answer. What would you say is the biggest challenge in your role?
For me, I mean, if we start a little bit broader, one challenge is the size of the operations. I mean, to do 40,000 assessments in a year, that's challenging. It's a challenge logistically, and you also have to be very efficient, find efficiency. So that's a challenge. And one thing that has been a challenge over the last few years is the growth rate that we're in as well. When I started in 2018, we did 20,000 assessments a year. And this year we're doing 40,000. And in 2028, the projection is 60,000. So we have a growth rate that is very, very fast. And that's a challenge, because you have to scale up everything. You need new offices, you need new staff, and we get more staff, you need more managers, and we get more managers, you need more levels of management. So that's a challenge. But for me, as a chief psychologist, I believe one challenge that I think about a lot is inter-rater reliability. Because we are there's so many of us, 100 psychologists. It's always a challenge to get everybody to assess in the same way. And it's you will never get like 100% exactly that everybody does everything the same. That's impossible. But you always want to strive towards it. So that's a challenge that we work with.
And I mean, that is so interesting, because I think when I'm out talking to, internal recruitment teams or hiring managers, that is often a question of like, how are we going to make sure that our hiring managers are actually assessing in the same way that we want them to do, or the same way as their colleague would do. But as you say, that the scale of your organization, this is just like a challenge that is just blown up, and it's so important that it is done in a fair way.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, if you're a small team, maybe you're 3, and you can always you can have discussions. How do you assess this? And I ran into this challenge. How do you do that? But that's impossible when there's 100 of you. You can't have those informal conversations. We have to take a more structural approach to it. But I mean, as long as it's humans doing assessments, there's always, because it's always interpretations. There's interpretation of verbal information when you're doing the interview. There's interpretation of visual information, emotional information that's inside of you when you're doing the assessment. And after that, it's another interpretation of your method, because the method is often written down. So you have to interpret that verbal information and try to make sense of it. So there's so much room for noise in a way. So that's why I think it's so hard.
To be sure. And I think, so you have developed your own test, the Swedish Enlistment Battery. Can you describe like the development process for that, like the purpose? How does it work?
Yes. The Swedish Enlistment Battery, it's a cognitive test. And within the military, there's a long-standing tradition of doing cognitive testing. In Sweden, we've been doing it since 1944. That was actually the first edition of the enlistment battery, the launch in 1944. At the moment, the current version is the enlistment battery 2000, which was, of course, then launched in the year 2000. So it's 25 years ago now. For the last 5 years, we have been developing the new enlistment battery that will be launched in May this year. I mean, things change. There's always, because in a test there's items, and items they tend to age. Some age faster than others. Verbal items change the fastest because the language is changing pretty rapidly. Logical items aren't that prone to change at the same rate, at least. So that was one important factor. It's just to get a fresh start. When we looked into it, we had three alternatives. One was to just do an overhaul of the existing test. The other was to create a new test, and the third option was to get a commercial test. But in the end, we choose to create a new one, and by doing so, we could also see to it to make the test a little bit more efficient. So that has been a part of it, to make a faster measurement. The current one measures in about 50 to 60 minutes, and the new one will measure in about 35 to 40 minutes. And that might not seem like a big deal, but if you multiply by 28,000, then you get some minutes. So we're always trying to chase that extra minute.
Of course. And I think it's interesting. I'm not gonna interrupt you. Sorry, but I mean, there's a lot of debate about cognitive testing when it comes to using that in the field of work. Why is a cognitive test something that you want to have as part of your process?
Well, with conscription and basic military training, it's a situation where you need to learn new stuff, right? The whole military training is a training situation, so every day will be about learning new stuff, and there are so many positions as well. I mean, you have everything from being a chef, cooking for soldiers, to being an interrogation officer, to being a ranger that deploys by parachute behind the enemy lines, to being the driver of a combat boat. So there are so many positions, and there are differences in how much theoretical information you have to absorb. So it helps us to place the individual in a position that matches their abilities in the best way. I mean, it's not good if you put someone who will struggle at learning things. It won't be good. But in the other way, if you put someone who's very fast at learning in a position where they aren't challenged, they will get bored as well. So we have found that it's a critical component in placing people in the right position.
I think that's so interesting, especially as you say, there's so many different roles with a lot of different demands. And when the people come to you, you don't know where they will end up. So this is a tool that can help you guide them to where they will probably have a good fit. Is that a good summary?
Exactly, a good fit where they can provide the most value with the abilities that they possess.
So besides this, like cognitive test, what other selection methods is part of the process?
For the mustering, and the mustering is a word that's used. That's basically the selection for the basic military training. So, in the mustering, we use the cognitive test, and on the psychology side, we use the psychologist interview. There are many other components as well. You see a doctor and have a health assessment. You see a nurse. We test your vision. We test your physical capacity, your strength. But the psychologist interview is there's really two main measurements that are the output of the psychologist interview. It's the suitability to serve, which is your basic ability to fulfill military or civil training. And there's also suitability for command, which is your will and ability to be responsible and lead others. And that measurement about the suitability for command, that's only made if you accomplish at least a 5 on the enlistment battery, and the scale is from 1 to 9, so you need to reach at least a 5. Then you have an assessment of your suitability for command.
How do you design because I'm guessing there's some sort of questions that the psychologist goes through. How do you come up with what to ask?
Oh, that's a good question. I mean, we've been doing this for a while now. I mean, in my safe behind me here, I have a manual for the mustering from 1972. So it's so there's been iterations of development going on, but I mean there is a requirements profile for basic military training, but as I said, it's very different because when you're assessing for normally you know exactly what role you're assessing for, right?
Yeah.
You're assessing for a manager or you're assessing for a specialist, but when you're assessing and there is a potential for several hundred different roles, you have to find the common denominators. And so without going into too much detail, I can say that when you're doing military training, you are taken out of your normal context, which is your home, your school, and your friends, and you're placed somewhere else with people you don't know from all parts of Sweden, and they might have very different backgrounds than you, and you're going to live very close together. There's really hard for you to have some private space. You're going to be sleeping in tents together. There's going to be stress. So you have to have some sort of social skills to develop and maintain relationships, and also both with your peers, but also with your commanding officers. So that's social skills is a part of it. And the other one is, of course, military training is more stressful and more strenuous than ordinary life. There will be uncertainty. There will be physical and mental strain. You will be woken up in the middle of the night, perhaps. There won't be as much food as you want at all times. So you have to have some sort of stability and coping towards stress. So that's one part of it as well. And another part is you're in a situation where you're trained in weapons, weapon systems, tactics, combat. Integrity is important, of course. We don't want to bring in the wrong types of person into the Swedish defense. And all positions are security classed. So that's important. And last but not least, it's also sort of a match between the organization and the person. And here there can be values. You have to support an open and democratic society. If you don't, military training is probably not a good fit for you. Yeah. So that's basically the common denominators of it all.
And I mean, we talked about it a little bit before. So we have this, like, you know what you want to assess based on like a lot of learnings over a lot of assessments, a lot of years. How do you actually work with like improving the inter-rater reliability between the assessors?
We have done many things during the years. There are different things that we do. There is one thing that we used to do a lot of, and we still do it. It's that we watch film of interviews and we assess them together. So that's one way of looking at stuff and discussing how we assess. But I have found that it's helpful, but since you're only looking at one interview, I mean, there are so many different types of interviews, so that is not like the final solution of it all, but that's one type of thing that you can do, and we do. We also do some cases when we find things that are hard to assess. We do like case exercises that we look at different parts of the assessment and assess them together, and we can provide guidance also how we want the psychologist to interpret a certain part of the method. We do also every psychologist, they can access their assessment statistics through our IT system. So we ask them to get their own statistics, and then we sit down and they can compare how they assess as compared to the whole group. And then you can see if you're a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, and you can reflect on why, and also reflect on if you have some tendencies as an assessor. Maybe you're a little bit strict, maybe you're a little bit lenient, and maybe that concerns different parts of the method. So that's one way of doing it. But at the core, it's about having like very structured methods. When we do interviews, there's always an interview guide, and in the interview guide there are questions that must be that you have to give the candidate, and then there are optional questions as well. But there are some must-ask questions. And then we have, of course, for each assignment, we have a manual, and the manual is, that's where all the criteria that you are going to assess, they are very clearly defined. And then we have rating scales for all of the criteria with like verbal explanations and examples. So that's how we approach inter-rater reliability at the agency.
And I think like the examples you bring up, it's a dream when it comes to like structured in recruitment. But I mean, John, I know that you have led like quite a significant like transformation during the recent years, like shifting, not just like looking at the assessment, but like using a more like mechanical approach and like aggregating methods. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, I have always been a fan of mechanical assessments, and I don't know, maybe it's because I have a background as an engineer, so I found that I think it's interesting, and there's also like a ton of science all the way back to like the 40s and 50s on mechanical prediction, and sort of the consensus is that mechanical prediction is at least as good as expert combination of data, but many times better. Yeah, and why is that? Because mechanical combination, the largest gain is that it reduces noise, because a formula is always the same, a calculation is always the same. Whereas an expert is a human, and a human, we know that a human can go through so many different states of mind during a day. There have been research on like when people go to court, the judges tend to be a little bit more strict when you get close to lunch, because I guess their blood sugar is falling. So I mean, as an assessor, if you don't if you do like this sort of clinical combination of data, it's hard to believe that you would do it the same way every day. So in research, easy, like simple mechanical formulas, they work very well, and in different contexts. It's within the legal system, like looking at violation of parole. It's like also for flight school, academic performance. So these types of formulas do very well. So I think that, in my opinion, you should use it in assessments, because it's efficient, it's fair, it's transparent, and it's more reliable. And if it's reliable, then you have like a platform for better validity as well. So I have always tried to implement that type of mechanical prediction models or selection models. When I started at the agency, I mean, within the agency, we do selection in many different ways. In the volume assignments, we do it by like a stepwise negative selection. We have cutoff scores for the different steps, and that is a mechanical selection model, because it's very clear. If you reach level 3, then you're okay. If you're at 1 or 2, then you're not. Then you won't go to the next step. So that's a mechanical model. But when I started, we had that, but there were only one assignment where the psychologist interview, because in an interview there are different like sub-variables, and those aggregate to the main variables. And there was only one assignment where that transition from sub-variables to the main variables were done in a mechanical way.
And just like, if I can just like translate this to a normal recruitment process, that means that like the individual interview questions trying to assess different things and weigh everything together. Is that a fair comparison?
Yeah. I mean, when you're assessing something, or you can do it in so many ways, but the normal thing is, okay, I'm trying to assess your social skills. So then I have to define what social skills is. And then I might have a scale from 1 to 5 or 1 to 4. So I assess given your answers and given my method, I give you a 4 on a scale of 1 to 5. So now I have you assessed your social skills, maybe your planning and structure and something else. But then I'm going to give you an overall suitability score. So how do I do that? Do I sit down and scratch my head and try to feel it out, or do I do a calculation? So that's what we have implemented all through every interview that is done, is like it weighs together in a mechanical way. And also we have, in the smaller assignments where we don't have to use this stepwise negative selection model, in those assignments or processes, we let the candidates go through every step. And when a candidate has gone through every step, then you have data for each selection step, and then you can weigh it all together in a mechanical way to a suitability score. And with a suitability score like that, you can have like a rated list from top to bottom, with the most suitable candidate to the least suitable candidate. So that's also something that we have implemented. And when I started, we didn't have anything like that. So it was sort of a journey. And we did it by starting small and letting it spread. So we started in a really small assignment, like it was maybe 5 candidates, but we developed a method for it, and then it went very well, and the client was pleased. So then I had the psychologists who did that present for the whole group, and it spread like rings on water. So then for other assignments, the assignment leader approached me and said, okay, we want to do something like this as well. So I gave them some guidance, and we developed the method in accordance with that, and it spread and spread and spread. So, and the lead step was the mustering, because that is our oldest selection. So I was a little bit hesitant because it seemed to work very well. But we took that step in 2024, where we made the transition so that the psychologists still assess all of the sub-variables, but then they type them into sort of an Excel sheet and get a calculation of the suitability to serve and the suitability for command. And it works very well. And I think that one key to getting buy-in is that we also have implemented like a development strategy for the psychologists. So we have modules in selection psychology. So we have trained them in selection psychology and told them about all of these studies and how it works and how to create the mechanical model and how to create the selection process. So that gave us like a common theoretical platform to stand on. And one other thing that we knew about, because there have been some research on what is called algorithm aversion. And basically it is that we are willing to listen to algorithms, but when we see algorithms fail, it's pretty fast for us to lose faith in them. We don't lose faith as fast in experts like in algorithms. And so there have been experimental studies where you can manipulate that. If you give individuals a little bit of influence over the algorithm, then they have more faith in the algorithm, and then they are more likely to adhere to it. So that's something that we have used within the agency. If the algorithm suggests a score, you have the ability to sort of override it if you feel that you have good reasons for it. And I think that has been like a success factor, because then it's not nobody wants to be forced in their job, so to say. So with that opening to maybe a little bit to the left or the right, we have the buy-in has been much better, I believe, than if we didn't do that.
Okay, this is so fascinating, because I think one realization that like I've had is that, okay, the majority of organizations, at least large organizations, they know that hiring needs to be structured. Like we know that from research, we know that from practice. But yes. I find it interesting that many organizations see that they have a structured process, but then they don't make a structured and informed decision based on all the data that they collect. I mean, that's exactly what you obviously had a structured process before, but now you've taken it to the next level with this more like mechanical interpretation.
Yes.
What has been the biggest like outcomes from this?
Well, one thing that we saw was the distribution of the assessments, because in the sub-variables, we're using a scale of 1 to 5, and in the main variables, we're using a scale of 1 to 9. So one thing that we saw, and I believe this is not, I think that many organizations, most struggle with this central tendency effect, that you are, as an assessor, you tend to go towards the middle. So we saw that as well, that our distributions were pushed into the middle, and the steps, the end of the scales were underused. So we wanted to spread out the distribution, and we wanted the end of the scales we wanted to have more assessments towards the ends of the scale, and that was a major success. We saw that the whole distribution just spread out, and it was almost perfectly like a bell curve. So that was really good.
And before you continue, why was that important?
Well, it's like a theoretical thing. If you believe that most people are average, and the further you get from average, the more seldom you have a case, right? So that's like that's how psychology, most of psychology works, right? In diagnosing and even in clinical tests. I mean, most human traits are normally distributed. I think the best example is length, because it's so obvious that if you go out around the block here, you will probably see a few men that are 1 meter and 80 centimeters, but you won't see maybe in a month a man that's 2 meters tall or 160. So that's like our view on assessing that most people are average. So then you want to see also that the distributions are like that you have like the most people should be in the middle, but not all people in the middle.
No,
because
exactly.
then it's not, because then you can't discriminate between. Because if you have a selection method that doesn't discriminate, it's useless, right? Because then you can't say which one has more of something or less.
No, exactly. And I mean, most organizations, I'm guessing you including, is that you want to find the people that differentiate themselves by being a stronger match for that particular assignment, for that particular job or role, right?
Yeah. But what we have done also for our method is that we have some like model distributions so we have something to evaluate against. If we have a model distribution, this is what we want to see in our assessments, in the sub-variables. We want to see that a certain amount should be assessed as a 1, as a 2, as a 3, as a 4, as a 5. Then we have something to evaluate against, and we can also correct. If we're not seeing that, then there's something with the method that's not working, at least as we want it to. So then we can correct it. And of course, it's possible to have if you can decide on skew distribution as well. If you know that you're going to assess people that are very good, then you can accept the distribution that is skewed towards the higher ends of the scale. But it's good to be aware of these things and not just let it happen. And I think this is a difference. We spoke earlier on what the difference is, and I said that we focus a lot on quality. And I'm not sure that anybody else is looking at their distributions of assessments and trying to hit certain distributions and try to reevaluate their methods to get certain distributions. This is, I think, a little bit unique, the focus on quality.
I really agree. And I think it's so inspiring because at the end of the day, we all want to, recruit the best people for the assignment that we have. But there's probably few organizations that have a more like important assignment to really get recruitment right compared to you. But I mean, that also speaks to you have resources to actually solve that assignment, and you do a lot of work. I think that is very obvious when you describe it. Like on like closing remarks, if you were to give some suggestions for people that want to get closer to the like level of recruitment that you have, what would you advise them to try out? Where would you go first if you want to work in a more structured, mechanical way to get that level of certainty?
I'd say that you have one suggestion is to decide on an assessment model. Of course, you have to. There's all sorts of groundwork that you have to do before that. You have to like do a work analysis. You have to have a requirements profile. But when you do have your profile and you have your defined criteria, then go for structure. Structure, I think, solves many problems. Have like a very clear model of what you're assessing and a scale. And then if you want to combine data towards a suitability score, the easiest way to do it is just equal weighting, and it works very well. So let's say you have a result from a cognitive test, and you have the results from an interview, and you have the results from a personality test. equal weighting will get you pretty far, but you have to make sure that your data is on the same scale, or else you will have problems, right? So, because if you have a cognitive test on a T scale and you have the interview on a 9 graded scale, it won't match in your algorithm. But if you get them to the same scale, and if you need some help there, get some help. But then just simple calculations get you very far if you use them every time, because they remove the noise. But then there's always this. It's easy to make a model, but then you have to follow the model, and that also takes something out of you. I mean, but
you make it sound easy, but I think it is a lot of work to get it to the level that you're at. But you got to start somewhere, and I like the tip of just like assigning some sort of like systematic approach, using the same scale for every method so that you can actually combine them. A good first step is like equal weighting before you know exactly what works, and you can start playing around with it. John, I could have talked about this for another 45 easily, but we are running out of time. So thank you so much for joining us. If there's anyone listening that found this as interesting as I did, we actually have a webinar where we will talk about this and be even more practical of how you can actually get some aspects of this into your hiring process. So that's something to look for. John, thank you so much. Happy Friday. Hope you get to avoid Melodifestivalen tomorrow. Thank you for joining us, everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much, Linnea. Bye.